Tariffs, the oft-used tax mechanism to control the flow of imported goods, has been in the news lately, particularly as it pertains to the US and China. China, which is the largest exporter of goods to American consumers, has been in a tit-for-tat tariffs hike with the US, the latter of which appears to be trying to force manufacturers to port production and manufacturing back into the US by making Chinese-produced products unappealing to US consumers based on price point. That's the Reader's Digest version, but the ripples of these trade tariffs are creating much bigger waves in the world economy because almost no country doing business with the US right now has escaped some form of tax bump. While tariffs themselves are not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to the control and management of imported goods, especially where a trade deficit exists, the measures we have seen from the Trump administration are much more exacting and widespread than we've previously seen in recent years. The Trump administration, for example, slapped a 145% tariff hike on Chinese imports several weeks ago, with the exemptions on tech items such as chips are back down following concerns about the ramifications on US big tech firms and the global economy in general. With trillions tumbling out of the stock exchange in a week and a loss of confidence in US bonds, some experts feel we were chasing a world economic recession until Trump relented. China had responded with a similar hike on US goods of 125%, with some exemptions for things like aircraft engines. But the tension remains as the two economic powerhouses vacillate on tariffs and retaliatory measures, with the US still looking to close the loophole on such things as low-value goods, that is sub $800, which would again increase prices for importers and consumers, particularly affecting supply companies like Amazon. So how will this impact the peripheral gaming industry? Gaming peripheral supply is a lucrative market with predictions of up to $17 billion being spent annually on things like gaming consoles and PC equipment within the next 10 years. The US accounts for around 34% of these purchases alone, and there is a powerful surge in the development, production, and sale of things like VR, HMD output devices from a wide range of manufacturers. This tech is becoming extremely popular in the flight sim and racing sim environment, among other areas, and is also a high-value commodity in commercial enterprises in the virtual training of pilots, where substitution for real-time training can now be much more practically achieved, reducing costs and also speeding up some of the finite areas of the training pipeline, particularly in the military pilot training arena. For consumers, though, there are swirling and complex issues afoot. An increase in tariffs will no doubt see some sort of price rise the longer the conflict continues, despite efforts to prevent this, such as front-loading goods prior to the initial enactment of the Trump administration's tariffs on Chinese-produced goods. However, other problems may arise in the form of supply chain issues as companies seek to source parts or production in factories and manufacturing centers in countries outside of China, such as Vietnam and India. It was reported that Apple was doing deals with these two countries to work around the high tariff costs associated with manufacturing goods in China, and therefore incurring those high tariff penalties. There may be challenges with this given the speed in which China is able to produce goods and also the volume needed for large tech companies like Apple, who have predicted cost increases of up to $900 million recently. Will these countries be able to support other companies' demands as well as big tech companies like Apple? And will the Trump administration react by exacting similar tolls on them to prevent the circumventing of the China tariffs? The broad picture is that if costs continue to rise across the board in terms of general living expenses and the costs of tech equipment, it's possible that many people may cut back on their consumer spending for non-essentials, harming the computer periphery business. In other words, there's going to be a drop in consumer confidence in conjunction with less spending power. To offset this, we've already seen some companies respond with the following statements made from Winwing and Peripheral last month regarding how they're handling the introduction of these tariffs. Winwing stated, well, warm greetings. To ensure smooth and timely delivery of your orders in light of the new US tariff policy taking effect on May 3rd, 2025, we have carefully evaluated the situation and decided to suspend the ordering function for US accounts on their global shipping site. This is going to start or has started since April 23rd of 2025. To continue enjoying a convenient shopping experience and access to your favorite Winwing hardware, we strongly recommend placing your orders through our dedicated US site. us.winwingsim.com. The US WinWing site will continue to offer fast, reliable service tailored to your region. WinWing remains committed to delivering outstanding simulation hardware and services to users worldwide. We will do our utmost to protect your interests, enhance the overall shopping experience, and bring you the very best in-flight simulation. Thank you for your continued understanding, support, and trust. We are closely monitoring changes and will continue to serve you with full dedication. If you have any questions or need assistance, please don't hesitate to contact our customer service team on the website. This was dated April 18th of 2025, so some things have changed a little bit since then, obviously. Moving on to Peripheral, and I missed the date that they published this, but they said that at that time, US President Donald Trump announced global tariffs on all goods imported into the USA. This includes a planned removal, as we have discussed, of the $800 de minimis threshold, tariffs on Chinese goods, and even 20% tariffs on EU goods. They are pleased to announce that their USA customers will not be affected by these changes. Peripheral Controls devices are primarily originated from their HQ and production facility in Lithuania and imported to the USA warehouse based in Tampa, Florida via Peripheral USA Incorporated. Customers will not experience any of the custom import processes as orders are shipped domestically. The prices on any already paid orders will not be revised, and we will be freezing Peripheral USA web store prices until the 17th of April. After that, the situation will need to be reviewed. So they're saying here they launched a worldwide spring sale, and the Peripheral USA web store will be included with the discounts stipulated. So again, stay tuned for details. They're working hard to ensure that their customers are not negatively affected by the changing situation, and they will continue to monitor the situation and will provide updates when necessary. Thank you from the Peripheral Controls team. So at this juncture, I haven't seen any direct price hikes from either team, possibly because of product front loading as described, as Chinese companies producing tech products have front-loaded merchandise into US warehouses in anticipation of increased tariffs on imported goods. One interesting article I found from GT Planet, they reported that Fanatec prices have increased dramatically, up to 50% for the CSL racing pedals among the items in its lineup. While the company is now owned by Corsair, who are based in the US, the products on offer are apparently produced in China. So this is the kind of thing that you can probably expect to see across the breadth of titles producing or companies producing peripherals and tech for the gaming industry. Now, according to a recent YouTube research article by Cameron Doherty Tech, Swiss-based company Logitech has already increased its prices across a wide range of products. Doherty tracked 176 pieces of tech from the company, with prices ranging from staying at the status quo to much bigger jumps of up to 20 and even 38%, again depending on the particular product. Of note for driving and simulation fans are high-priced items like the Pro Racing Wheel, which normally retails for just under $1,000, $999. That has jumped up to $1,199, therefore a 20% increase. It's likely some of this sim equipment is going to cost more if it has more complex componentry such as motors or actuators, etc., in which Chinese manufacturers seem to dominate the production market thereof. I expect to see some variability in pricing depending again on the particular product as described with Logitech there. A large company though like Logitech, which makes a vast array of products ranging from keyboards to headphones and mice, can likely absorb these tariff hikes a little bit more easily than perhaps a smaller company which is focused on a more niche flight simulation product and producing equipment in lower volumes, presumably sub $800 for the de minimis, which right now is a little bit of a loophole in the import business. Now, necessity is the mother of invention, and I expect the solutions to some of these issues to vary between companies and become potentially creative as they reroute production, supply chain, accept narrower profit margins for a period, or simply bump up prices enough to ride out the problem until a political and economic resolution is reached. Whatever that is, we'll have to wait and see. A Pimax rep spoke with me recently as I raised this very issue about tariffs, and the team is doing its very best to limit the impact on prices so that consumers don't have to worry too much about it, at least at this time. Now, on their official page with regards to things like the Crystal Light, the good news they say is that the Crystal Light still has stock in warehouses across the United States, at least at the time of the publication of this particular blurb. So if you ordered the Crystal Light recently, you will not be affected by the new tariffs as your headset is shipped to you within the country. More good news is that the purchasers of the Crystal Light in the short term are also exempt from this new tariff, as their warehouses still have stocks. But this is a while stocks last issue, so if you are planning to order a Crystal Light, they do advise that you order it as soon as possible, which is not a sales push. I mean, it is a sales push, but it's not a malevolent one per se. They're simply saying, hey, if you are planning on purchasing, don't dilly-dally because you may end up having to pay more for it later, which I think is a reasonable thing to say. Now, in some point, they say they will need to ship new headsets to these warehouses. Tariffs will therefore apply to the new stock and purchases, and the cost of this will be passed on to the consumer, although again, they are trying to avoid this as much as possible. Now, I believe the Crystal Super should have shipped, at least at the time of the recording of this, and these orders will potentially be hit by the additional 10% tariff. However, taking in mind the slightly delayed shipping, Pimax has decided to take on the costs of some of these purchases made before February 4th, when the announcement was made about the tariffs, etc., as a way to thank their supporters and to make sure pre-ordering is still beneficial to their customers. Crystal Super purchases made after February 4th, though, which was 3 months ago effectively, there will likely be additional costs, but they are determining the last details for this. As I said, they're trying to avoid doing that, so wait for the next update to see what happens next. This only applies to customers in the United States. The 10% tariffs only applies to the base price of the headset, not to Prime, so when applicable, customers will pay the tariff in the Pimax Play together with the payment for Prime. Now, for repairs or replacements, there is no import tax needed when swapping your headset or returning it after repairs. These repairs and swaps are done within the country you reside. They do say, though, they can't comment on resellers or third parties selling the headsets. So for this, it's best to talk directly to the reseller if tariffs will therefore be applied. So again, a lot of swirling issues. The bottom line is that there is a great deal of uncertainty, and that in itself is problematic for the marketplace and long-term consumer confidence, even with the size of the lucrative periphery market as I described. Large companies, as I said, like Logitech, will of course have a broader range of products that they can use to help absorb some of the tariff pain, and perhaps our smaller manufacturers of more niche or focused periphery tech, as I mentioned before. While there are signs that manufacturing could find its way back to the US to offset some of these problems, it's not a quick solution or a quick process. Estimates range from 5 to 15 years to get some plants to get set up, and of course the cost of setting up some of these plants is in the millions of dollars, so it's not an easy thing for a lot of companies to do. Many companies, especially these smaller teams, definitely cannot afford to set up their own manufacturing plants, again, depending on what they're producing. And so they're reliant, therefore, on, again, the componentry produced by Chinese warehouses, which are very flexible, adaptable, and can produce in great numbers very, very quickly. This all, of course, begs questions about what happens in the interim and what it's going to do for consumer confidence. Now, among the other flies in the ointment is that while we can see the prices beginning to rise on some of this periphery equipment, there is an impact too on the hardware that it's all attached to, and that's our PCs. Now, remember, NVIDIA launched the 50 series cards, graphics cards that is, earlier this year, and it was really a bit of a disaster for consumers with an almost immediate shortage of supply. This is based because of bot-based scalping activity and mass buyouts limiting launch supply, and even accusations that NVIDIA deliberately kept a bit of a trickle of supply at the outset, testing the marketplace. Well, the cost of these graphics cards have shot up post-launch to levels that rival full system build prices for high-end 4090 gaming rigs prior to the 50 series cards being released, say back in 2024. So with the tariffs in full swing now, it's unlikely we're going to see relief from these outrageous prices, and anyone needing a PC update right now is likely going to feel it in the pocket in some way, shape, or form. These new tariffs may not crush the flight sim periphery business, but it's certainly going to leave it bruised the longer this situation remains unresolved. So stay tuned for more on this in the near future.
Are we refueling during the exercise? No, we'll be carrying 2 wing tanks, and that should be enough. So no pre-strike refueling for us. However, keep in mind that the minimum emergency fuel is 2,000 pounds. So if you're running low, it's better to tank post-strike than flaming out 3 miles from the field. And by the way, if anyone lands with less than 2,000 pounds, I'm going to ground them for a day. Understood?